Everybody, thanks for coming out. Excellent turnout. Thank you all for taking time from your TIFF to be here. This is fantastic. I would like everybody to just start with a sort of extended elevator pitch for the films they have here at TIFF, and we'll just go down the line. So Joey, tell us about Castle on the Ground.
That's funny. We talked back there, but that's the one thing you didn't tell us we were supposed to. I don't want to be a dick. I don't do elevator pitches. My brains can't do that. But my film is about a young boy who falls into addiction after his mother dies and befriends the older woman who moves in across the hall who's trying to get out of a life of addiction, and together they fall into quite a dangerous situation as they become more and more codependent on one another.
Amy Jo?
That was an elevator pitch. You did it.
It was like a weird escalator.
Imagine you have 20 floors. You have a good long elevator ride.
Yeah. My film is called Tammy's Always Dying. It's about a woman who threatens to jump off a bridge once a month to keep her daughter tethered to the town that they live in, is how I sort of explain it in a nutshell. It stars Felicity Huffman, and we premiered on Thursday, and we screen again tonight and next Saturday.
Albert.
My film is called Clifton Hill, and it's about sort of a pathological liar that returns to her hometown of Niagara Falls to settle her affairs after her mother passes, which includes dealing with a motel that they owned. And then during her time there, she kind of stumbles upon some photographs that kind of conjure up a repressed memory of a kidnapping. And then she starts to follow that trail and goes down a very strange, dark rabbit hole. And so that's Clifton Hill.
Okay, and Semi.
They all sound so intriguing. My film, American Woman, is the story of two women radicals on the run in 1974. One is an Asian American activist who has had to go underground after setting off bombs in protest of the Vietnam War. And the other is a kidnapped heiress who has joined her radical captors. And it's inspired by a true story.
A true story you might have heard of, yes. Well, congratulations all. It's a fantastic achievement. Amy Jo, I'm going to start with you. You did something that we Canadians rarely see, which is that you moved from LA to Toronto for a film career. So talk about that a little bit.
I did. And now I'm a Canadian citizen as well. Now I'm a Canadian. Woo! And I love it here. I love it here. Yeah, I spent about 15 years in LA as an actress. And for me, I had a hard time there. First of all, I think I wasn't quite doing the thing that I actually love, because once I started filmmaking, I realized how much this is what I should be doing. But for me, living in Los Angeles, I found I was constantly comparing myself to everybody around me, and it was not a healthy way for me to live. So on a whim, I moved my entire life to Montreal in 2005 and sort of decompressed there for a bit. And then I got offered Flashpoint, and that's what brought me to Toronto. And then I fell in love with this city, and this is my home now.
And was there a specific thing that turned you toward directing?
Yeah, a few things, but I wrote a screenplay called Crazier Than You, and it's based off of my mom's story, her life story. And I just want to do a really good job with that film, and I want to direct it. So I thought, I need to learn how to do this, and I need to practice. And so I did my first short film, and in doing that short, I realized, oh my God, this is what I want to do with my life. So I've stopped acting and just fully focusing on filmmaking. And then I did 2 more short films, and then my first feature, The Space Between, and Tammy's Always Dying is my second feature.
So, wow, congratulations. Yeah, I do remember that LA thing. My husband and I called it the greed headache. Like where your greed headache.
Oh,
where it's
wow,
like
that's a great way to put it. The greed headache.
Yeah, it's too much. Too many Ferraris at the red lights.
But some people, I think, can handle it there, Yeah. Like
There's a kind of sugar high where people come and they're always like, oh my God, Tammy, I had 5 meetings and they loved me. And it's like,
good,
oh, that's LA. Everyone loves everyone and nothing ever happens.
Nothing ever
and then
happens.
you have a bad headache.
But you could
afterwards.
always be the next big thing, so they're always willing. Now, Albert and Joey, you both set your films in very specifically Canadian locations, Niagara Falls and Sudbury. And those locations really become characters in the movie, I think. Why was that important for you to do? You can start.
In the case of my film, we shot in Sudbury, and it's set in 2012 because that was a pivotal moment in what people call it the opiate epidemic and the crisis, and that seems like a euphemism to me. It's a fucking genocide, and the people that started it over 2 decades ago knew what they were doing, and they've willfully killed people. So sorry if that's rude, but it's not a fucking epidemic. And in 2012, Purdue Pharma took OxyContin off the market for reasons of patent, and that's when fake OxyContin started to really heavily hit the streets. And it's happening in Sudbury, it's happening all over the north, it's happening across our whole continent, obviously, and it just seemed disgusting to go up there and shoot it when it's happening up there and not say it is there, because it is there. And the people of Sudbury and the city in every way really supported the film, and they were just wonderful collaborators, and I felt absolutely like they could have been skeptical about us, and they could have, you know, had the attitude of like, who are you folks to come tell our story? And it was just the opposite. So it's the very, very least any of us could do to just honestly say, from a simple point of respect, this is Sudbury.
And did you use local people in as extras or anything like that? Were you able to incorporate?
Very much so. That in so many different, really lovely and loving ways, the people of Sudbury are in the film. All the background performers are from Sudbury. I think, to be honest, there was, you know, attitudes or stigmas about the crews up in the north when the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund started and funding started to bring filmmakers up there. And we had great people. We had this amazing second AC and a camera apprentice that got upgraded right away because her name was Ashley. She was just a badass. So the crews were amazing. The background people were amazing. This lady named Ashley St. Jean, I think, was our BG casting director, and she did a very, very, very good job. And I guess more than all of that, the folks of Sudbury just opened their doors. They opened the doors of their clinics to me and Imogen so that we could quietly do some research and just make sure we were grounding everything in the deepest reality we could get to. And there was one lady who met with Imogen and I, and just our background casting agent put out a note on the internet. She answered very quickly. She didn't want anything. She didn't ask for anything. She wouldn't take anything we offered her. She just wanted to share her story with Imogen and I just to help us ground it. And everybody there just had the most noble and generous and I think brave intentions. So
I think you can feel that in the film too.
Thanks for saying that.
Albert, you're on like the seedy side of Niagara Falls. What was that like?
So my story is sort of tethered to my own sort of personal history, which is my parents, when they first immigrated to Canada, they settled in Niagara Falls and they bought a motel sort of in the shadows of Clifton Hill, kind of like in the film. And I'm maybe a little unlike Joey's situation. You know, we're shooting kind of in Clifton Hill, around Clifton Hill, and you know, it's a very big tourist attraction, and you know, they want to sort of control the narrative of how that area is portrayed, and they had some concerns about what our intentions were, and you know, they just were worried that we were going to show Niagara Falls or Clifton Hill in a negative light. So you know, we had some difficulties there, but what that did is it kind of gave us the opportunity to create sort of the Niagara Falls from my memory, which is what the movie is more about anyway. So we took that as a way to kind of create not the Niagara Falls that is, but sort of the Niagara Falls, like the cinematic version of Niagara Falls. And yeah, so it was sort of at the time a tricky situation, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, I think.
And that's like 9/10 of the battle, right? Is just dealing with the stuff that you don't expect.
Absolutely.
Semi, you started as a writer-producer and went on to great acclaim and Emmy nominations with Mad Men, but directing wasn't always your goal, right? Like it kind of snuck up on you. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, the thing that I was just telling Stephanie this because I remember her having a short in the festival many years ago, and I was like, oh, women direct movies. And it's terrible to say, but I knew a couple women directors. I had made a number of short films that had been in the festival, and then I had when I read the book of American Women, I optioned it myself 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, and spec'd the script, and I was talking to directors about doing it. It kept not happening, and I really knew how I wanted it to be, and it finally took a studio executive, a man, and he called me and said, I love that script, and I think you should direct it. And I was like, oh yeah, I should direct it. And it's shocking to me that was my story. I really don't know why it had never occurred to me. But I feel like that was about 3 years ago. And even in that short time, while I was making the movie, I see so many more women directors around me, and it seems so much less of a leap now. Mm-hmm. So.
And how did you take to it? Did you really
I loved it.
action?
I was on the set for about an hour and a half, and I was like, oh my God, I have to do this all the time. And the same thing where I was like, oh, this is what I meant the whole time I was writing scripts.
I had a similar thing as well. I just never thought I could direct. And actually, it's funny because with Crazier Than You, I had done a TV series with John Hamm before. And I sent him the script, and I said, because he had started directing Mad Men, and I said, can you read this? Do you want to direct this? And he wrote back, and he goes, Amy Jo, you have to direct it. And it was the first time that I was like, oh, maybe I could do that. And it was like, he almost like gave me permission.
It's so interesting to me because on the last season of Mad Men, every single director of those 14 episodes, the first thing that they had ever directed was a Mad Men, like the first television show, right? So that show had like empowered all these new directors and really like, people who were inside that story, that Matthew Weiner really believed that they could also direct that story, including John Hamm, and still. It took someone actually just saying to me, oh, you should direct it. You know how it should be. Yeah. And I was like, well, don't you have to know other stuff?
You'll figure it out.
I mean, and that's after I had directed short films, too. But you don't. And I went to a panel much like this right before I went into prep on my movie, at the WGA, actually, where there was writers who had transitioned to directing, talking, and Barry Jenkins got up, and he was like talking about making Moonlight, and he was like, he said that he just wanted to put in the script everything that he meant, so that everyone would show up on set to help him say what he meant. And I was so inspired by that, and I was like, oh, you make it sound really simple. Yeah. Just put in the script what you mean, and everyone will know what you mean, and they'll help you mean what you say. But that was really inspiring to me.
Yeah. It's interesting, a lot of you have worked in television, and this thing is happening with film and TV right now where it used to be the barrier to entry to make a film used to be so high, right? You had to know everything about lenses, and it was super expensive, and TV was people's way in, and now I feel like that's flipped. Like TV's the more sort of I don't know, this golden age of TV thing, and we can make films on our iPhones. And do you all feel that there's a different form of entry into filmmaking now? And do you feel like that flip is a good thing for film, a bad thing for film, for directors?
I was going to say I have no idea because this is my entry, so I'm not comparing it to anything besides what I'm doing. So that's a terrible answer. I probably shouldn't have picked up the microphone and said anything.
We're the two hungover people on this side of the...
Oh. I bet the's a lot of
We were joking backstage.
Yeah,
like, oh, the fucking actors. Hungover. Sorry, I'm not saying you are. I am. I have done work in TV as an actor and mostly had a lousy time because I'm not that interested in hitting marks, and in TV, if I've acted, it's been guest stars, and that tends to be, unfortunately, still in this country, like, you just have to show up and cry while leads are, like, going around to get a bad guy, and I just don't have much room in my head or heart for that kind of stuff anymore, and so film to me is, like, totally liberating, and I'm a big film geek, and so cinema is, like, the thing I'm literally obsessed with. So there's obviously, sorry to say this, but, like, outside of our country, for my taste, amazingly exciting TV all over the world, and cinematic, stuff that you guys did, and just in general, opportunities to be really creative and tell the story you need to tell the way you need to tell it, which I would hope would always be the rub. But unfortunately, there just seems to be something here, and again, I've experienced it as an actor, where it's just like, they call them shooters, you know? Like, you get that on the slider, and then you get pop, 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 and it's like, at a certain point, people are literally doing it, like, while they're just texting and stuff, and it just, people tune out, and I guess the main thing to me is just, Steve McQueen said, I love this so much on the extras of Hunger. He said, you have to be responsible for the violence you put out into the world. And I just feel like, unless I have kids and have no choice, I don't know that I want to fight so hard to just maybe make some things that are bad candy. So that's the thing in my head.
Yeah. Hear, hear. I think one of the things I brought from experience in television and producing television to film is that I just don't believe in the like sort of singular vision genius thing, which I think for a long time the actual separation was, well, in film you have auteurs and they know everything and they know all the lenses and they're brilliant with actors and they just have, you know, it's this sort of genius that blooms into the film, whereas in TV it's just like a bunch of people doing something together. And you know, at some level I started in theater, you know, just when I was really young, I did a lot of theater and plays, and I really love collaboration. And when I realized that that making a movie could also have that kind of collaborative feeling, and that in some way I really felt like, okay, I don't have to be that singular genius. I just have to conduct this orchestra, and I have to make sure that everyone is playing their instrument beautifully, and I pick the right people, and I surround myself by with these people who are both good at what they do and are simpatico with what I'm trying to do. And that was sort of how I knocked down the wall of fear and went forward. I was just like, as soon as I don't quite know how to do what I want to do, I'm going to ask someone. And I think that is, you know, that's the flow between television and film, that both of them are sort of rethinking those old paradigms.
Mm-hmm. Albert, do you find that you have to explain your decision or defend your decision, or do you feel like film is as viable as it ever was and we can keep it that way?
Well, I mean, speaking from someone that has zero television experience in any way, shape, or form, just in terms of my journey as a filmmaker, you know, right now there definitely is sort of the noise in the air about, you know, television, and the truth be told, I didn't watch a lot of TV. I still haven't watched a lot of TV. I came into this wanting to be a filmmaker, and maybe it's very highfalutin and whatnot, but so, you know, for me, it was, you know, my first feature I made for $10,000 with my own money. Like, it was one of those things, and it didn't do anything. And then my second feature, I went all the way to Korea and made a film for $100,000, and it did a lot better, and it kind of gave me the opportunity to do this. So it's been a sort of, you know, through failure, and I made a bunch of short films as well that, you know, most of them are sort of embarrassing, and you know, just really sort of finding my path as a filmmaker, and knowing that, you know, instead of, you know, laser focusing on one thing, which was the thing that I had passion for, which is the thing that I wanted to do, and not being distracted by other things, whether that was television or, you know, like web series. That was a big thing that people were talking about. Like, you should do a web series, and that'll get you this thing, and sort of blocking that out and really being like, no, I want to make movies and still make a stand for cinema.
Yeah, a director once said to me, directing's like sex. You never get to see how the other people do it, right? And it is one of those jobs where you're...
In TV, we get to see both.
Yeah. But it is one of those jobs where you're learning on the job and you're the boss. So, like, do you have sort of inner monologues when you go to bed at night that you're convincing yourself? Is it an everyday process, or do you just have to, like, toughen up and be that person and go out there?
I think for myself, doing Tammy's Always Dying, I'll take that one as an example. The biggest obstacle that I had within going into making this movie was myself and all of my fears. And I was loving what you were saying about really relying on everybody around you. And that was the thing that I really learned to do, and I realized, oh my God, this DOP, Daniel Grant and Marion, everybody's role is so important. And then as the director, I'm finding is like the biggest learning curve for me is to figure out how to utilize everybody and to really rely on them and really have everybody shine and to help make a great movie. And so I love learning that and figuring that out, and it's important.
But by the way, a bunch of my short films are really embarrassing too. Damn the internet, because they're never going away. But I've had the privilege of working with a couple artists that I really admire, and seeing that one thing is that they were not afraid to embarrass themselves, and not afraid to be vulnerable, and not afraid to ask for what they need, whether it's showrunners or actors. And I think that maybe actors have a greater insight into that sometimes because they have to walk out there and do it in front of everyone every time and be so vulnerable. And I really tried to live in that spirit where I was like, I'm going to be like there was one scene in my movie, we set up the shot that I had assiduously prepared with the DP, and we'd been there and we'd taken it with the Artemis, which if you don't have Artemis and you want to be a director, get it. It's on your phone. It's a viewfinder. But we set up the shot and I was we did one take and I was like, oh my God, it looks terrible. And we have this location for one day and I'm already behind and I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, it looks like a comedy. It looks like a sitcom. What's happening? Why? Why does it look like that? And I literally was like, okay, come here, everyone. I was to the producers and the DP and stuff, and I was like, why does it look like a sitcom? What is happening with this scene? And we started shooting. We shot all morning, and I changed the angle. We relit. I went in there. It was still really bad. And at noon, we were really behind. And some asshole in the crew was like, ooh, call the Bond company. And I was so vulnerable. And seriously, and I was like, is that a real thing? Do they call the Bond? And it's so funny because my best friend was taking her daughter to camp, and she was like, I'm going to stop by your set. And I texted her and was like, do not come to my set. I am having a total meltdown. And at lunch, we sat down at the table with the producers and the AD and the cinematographer or whatever. And I was like, they were like, what do you want to do? We can't come back to this location. We have another scene tonight. And I was like, what is wrong with this scene? Can we just talk about it for a second? What is it supposed to be? What did everyone think it was going to be? It was so vulnerable. And I kept thinking, but the actors are fucking out there doing it. And they know it's not working too. And then weirdly, we came back from lunch. We changed the lighting. We changed the angle. I was like, let's try it a totally different way or whatever. We did. It was suddenly amazing. And then the second scene we had to do, we had 2 hours. And it was a pool game. And I was like, frame above the pool table, because there's no way we're having continuity with that pool table. I had done sketches of where the pool balls would be so we could keep it or whatever. I was forget that. Just get the pool table out of the shot. We did it in 2 hours. The scene's great. I mean, you tell me. But it was the thing where I was like, if I act like I know what I'm doing, or if I act like I'm going to pull this off, just give me a minute here, I am dead. And we'll never have this scene.
Yeah, I mean, not to undermine the mystique of the director, but we really are just as good as sort of the people that we bring on board. Whether it's the actors or all the crew, and obviously we have to lead with a vision and a point of view and everything else. But it's really not. This is my first film where I had, more than 10 people on a set. I went from 10 people on a set to 75 people on a set. And the truth is that nothing was different, It's just about communicating and knowing what you want to do and knowing what you want to say. And when you don't know what you're doing, just saying that, and all these people are there to help you. And if they know that, you are vulnerable, you're being very honest, and they understand that you're not just sending them down, dark alleyways without not knowing anything, but you've communicated a vision. These people are really smart. These people are really good at what they do. And so it is a team effort and a true collaboration.
I also think what you said, what is it supposed to be is so fundamental and true always. I come from an acting background, and I got trained at a certain kind of school, so I'm very interested in what does it have to feel like, and how do we, if it's a first-person point of view film, put the audience in the character's shoes in simple cinematic ways. And so it's imposter syndrome can happen every second for sure, but it's also it is like anyone can be a director. You have to figure out what you love, I think. You have to figure out what you love and what you hate. You have to know what you hate. Like, when I love film, so for a while I was like, I love everything, and then you start to like music. You start to realize like I just don't like noise music. I thought I did, and I don't. And it's the same with, I think I know much more about myself after 2 shorts, also shit probably, I don't know, like pretty shitty, but and 2 features, truly. And like it's great if you don't like my film, but it's my film, and I made it my way, and I know a little bit more about what I want to do. And then you have, Jorge was here earlier, my editor, he's amazing. Zosha's about to be here, the production designer. She's the very best. So if you have like the privilege of working with amazing artists, they elevate you, and you get to be like, I like Nan Golden. Let's look at her photography, and then it's there. Then it's like, that's what it looks like, and that's amazing.
So what do you hate? What have you figured out?
I'm just not that in, personally, no offense, guys, if I haven't seen your films yet. I don't love a lot of handheld camera work. I just don't like looking at that. It's obviously very correct for certain kinds of films. I tend not to love to watch those films. Like, I like more formal filmmakers like Steve McQueen. That being said, some of the handheld stuff that Lynn Ramsey's done, I like it because it's so emotionally charged. Like the handheld work in Morven Callar is emotionally motivated by where Samantha Morton's character is. I find a lot of times I see handheld camera work because people haven't made choices. And I think it's just always about making strong choices based on what's the state of being of the main character and what does it need to feel like for your film. So that tends to be just like strong decision making from, like people like to say auteurs, but just people who had some, David Fincher I don't think ever writes his scripts, but he must have some major input once the script is there because he's got such a strong vision. Andrea Arnold, like the way she, there's a ton of handheld stuff in Wuthering Heights. It's one of my favorite films ever. But it's so specific. I guess it's just about being personal and specific.
You don't like the overuse of it.
I don't like looking at something and being like, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to feel right now because I'm not sure you know how you want me to feel. I just feel like I want to be manipulated in the right ways.
Were you going to jump in, Sammy?
Oh, I was going to say, so I had the privilege of working with Steve McQueen and his line producer on something. And the line producer was telling me this crazy story about when they were shooting Shame, where they had a scene where people were getting off the subway, and then they had a scene that was going to be happening on the street. And the plan was just to go down and shoot every subway that arrived, and then run up and shoot on the street, and then run down and shoot every subway that arrived. That was their whole plan. And he said Steve was like down there. He would like run down the steps. He's a big guy. And he would like run down the steps, and the subway would get out, and they would be like filming, and there was like signs, if you walk here, you're in the film or whatever. And he'd be like going like, what are you doing, man? Go over there, whatever, like yelling at the people getting off the subway who had no idea, right? And so the line producer told me this story, and I said to Steve, I was like, how did you know what you were filming? Like, because that kind of chaos is not in the movie at all, right? It's so intentional, that movie. And he was like, well, I don't know. I mean, you have to be completely there when the camera's rolling. Nothing else matters. And I always think of that too, like, this is a man running up and down the stairs into the subway, shooting 2 scenes at once, who was able to like let that go and be right in that moment and see what he was getting in his movie and whether it was what he wanted. And then if it wasn't what he wanted, he was like yelling at people to make it what he wanted. And I really also was like that. I was like, no matter how stressed you get or how much you don't know what you're doing or whatever, you know the story you're telling. And when you say action, or if you're like me, you sometimes forget to say action. When somebody says say action, you just have to drop it and look at the movie. Like you're watching your movie right then on set. And it's the same in editing. Like I felt like every time I screened the movie, I was like, oh, I'm super stressed. We only have 24 hours left or whatever. But it's like, just watch the movie. Is that what you mean?
Amazing. Yeah. Is that what you mean? Like Shame, I personally love the formal execution of that film. There's a ton of handheld work in that film, but like you said, like say what you mean and the intention behind it.
Right. And do you all feel that sort of magical thing where what you're watching, the camera is also, like, do you have that belief that you're seeing the thing and you can recognize it when you see it as it's this transmogrification that's happening between what's being filmed and what's going to end up in the final movie? Like, when you have it?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think there are magical moments where I'm watching something and I'm moved and I'm like, oh. And then there's surprising moments in the editing room, right? Where it's like, oh, wow, I had no idea, or changing the story. And I know as an actress, I always thought, when I was moved, it was like, oh, well, that was great. And then it's not. It's like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, yep.
We have to be open. This is the Canada question. Is Canada a uniquely good, bad place to make movies? How's it been for all of you here?
I'm gonna go first because I'm a new Canadian and I love it here. And I love being a filmmaker in this town. And I really do. To read or hear a script from Joanne Sarrazin, who wrote Tammy's Always Dying 2 years ago at the Canadian Film Centre, and be at TIFF within 2 years is so extraordinary and amazing. And it's because of Telefilm and CBC and Crave and like all of these funding. We can make a movie. Like we can find the pieces to piece all it together. All the funding, and then the crews are amazing, and the DGC is amazing, and I really feel like I landed in the right city to become a filmmaker.
Anybody else?
I'm an old Canadian, and I feel the same. I was so grateful and so overwhelmed with the joy of returning to Toronto and to Ontario and shooting here and I got to work with people who I had worked with 20 years ago, and they had been like PAs, and now they were like running their department. I got to work with old friends like Jane Tattersall, who's in the last panel, who had like taught me so much through my short films, and it was just pure joy, and it really and the support from Telefilm and CBC and the OMDC and these entities, and then just the community that exists here, which really. I've never experienced elsewhere. The community of people who some of them I went out and worked on their short films. Some of them came out and worked on my short films for free, and it's really a rare thing, and it's envied, I think, in Los Angeles by people. There's people in the writers' room in Mad Men who were like, "How'd you get to make a short film?" And I was like, we had this thing called a Bravo Fact, and they gave me some money, and then a bunch of my friends came and helped me.
The best possible way. Anybody else want to jump in on that?
Oh, I mean, it's also just getting better and better, and it's very exciting right now. And I think that having a system at all is obviously an insane privilege. Like, they don't have that in the U.S., and I got to make a couple of my shit shorts were Bravo Fact shorts, and it's insane. I mean, we got, it's soft money. It's about curating culture and community, and it's that thing of a community. There is one now, and coming up as an actor, it feels more like just you're lost in an ocean, but the filmmaking community and the people that are staying here to do work is really exciting, and it just seems like there's a lot of film nerds in like the funding quarter now and in the distribution quarter, so I think it's just like a whole community, I mean, maybe it's felt a little bit like us and them back in the day, I don't know, but it just feels like there's a whole community curating cinema for our country that like is strong. It's really like actually strong. Like, I know there's stigmas about, like back in the day it seemed to be a dirty word to say Canadian film, but some amazing filmmakers who happen to be Canadian doing things here. Like my friend Nicole Dorsey's got a dope film here. Like, she's a filmmaker, man. Calvin and Yona's film, like I can't wait to see their films. Like it's actually truly exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of everything you guys all said, which is that in this country, I got to make this kind of bonkers film in Niagara Falls after making a $100,000 movie in South Korea in Korean, and that's truly because I'm a filmmaker in Canada. I don't think that would have happened anywhere else. So there is. And and nobody stopped me. There were no studio notes. Like they trusted me to do this thing, and and supported me all the way through, which is quite incredible. And because of that, you're emboldened to take risks, and because sometimes when you're in a different system or a studio system or whatever, you don't get to have that freedom. So to have the privilege of having some freedom, I feel like it's our sort of our duty to do something with that freedom and take risks and be bold and not be afraid to fail and try to distinguish ourselves and put forth our true voice as opposed to one that's been neutered or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, true voice.
I think that about risk, you're 100% right. That like if we all made shitty short films, I have some terrible scripts in the drawer. Like, it's really. I remember in the writers' room once the showrunner saying to me, "That thing you think is too dumb to say. That's the thing that I want to hear." And you could just tell from the expression on my face that I was like scared to risk it. But that's where greatness comes from. It's like risk. Right?
How much do y'all think about audience? Like, is there a number? How big an audience is enough or not? Like, do you think about those kinds of things at all?
Sorry, like how many people will see it, or
Yeah.
who is our audience when we're making it?
Both. Either. I was thinking number, but...
For me, filmmaking has become sort of like this cathartic thing that I don't really think about that. Like, I really, truly am just thinking about what is I want to say and how it's gonna, what it's gonna say to other people. But for me, I think I just have to do what's in my heart and make the film that I love. And if people happen to love it, then that's really great. But it's not my intention when I go to make a film of who am I going to. I mean, maybe I should think about this at some point in my life, but at this point, I'm not. Yeah.
For me, the thing that kind of freaks me out the most is if, I made something derivative, but maybe it was sort of kind of programmed in a way where a lot of people would see it, and then people would see me as a derivative filmmaker. Would be the biggest fear. So, like, I don't think you can think about that, and you have to think about the work, because the work will, the work is the thing that sort of lasts, not the, like, obviously if people come to see it and all that stuff is great, but I think if you chase that, then it's a futile game.
I had the lead of my film is an Asian American actress, this incredible Hong Chow, who's just fantastic in the movie. And when I was casting her, it was a question. People were like, well, does she get the audience? And there was a lot of questions about that. And I was like, let's fucking make an audience then. Like, this is a character that her specific character at that time period I've never seen in the center of a film. I've never seen a story about her. And I responded to it, and I know people will. So I feel like the stories that I'm telling, maybe the audience isn't there and I'm not serving a known audience, but I know that an audience can coalesce around the right story. And I think that's that's another risk that cinema can take and that films can take, and that TIFF is killing it at taking that risk. Like, I think TIFF is very intentional, again, about finding those stories we haven't heard and building an audience for stories going forward.
Can we put that on a poster somewhere? Let's make an audience for it then. Can that be a slogan for the CBC or somebody?
Can I just say one quick thing about audience? It's also just everything's changing so fast with the movies. Like, theatricals are starting to just be for superhero films, so it's just about platforms too, I think. And I mean, I think it's like, I think we make films here on public money. We owe the country so much to like make sure they are seen, but it's also this weird moment where it's not clear what the sea change is going to be. I don't personally think you can ever try to please people. I think you have to make what you have to make, but try not to work in a vacuum. And I think that hopefully also, like, I really meant what I said. I'm really excited about the distributors I'm working with because they're film nerds, and I think like it'd be interesting to see, strategy. Like, everyone's got to be creative in this game. It can't just be we do the creative stuff. And it's like everyone's got to be creative. And I think that there's maybe new things that are coming that aren't quite clear yet.
Right. And social media, friend or foe, like, it can really get your film seen. It can sometimes torpedo a film. Do you worry about that? Are you courting that? Is that part of any of your strategies?
I'm not on social media, so I have no idea.
Really? As a filmmaker, you're not. Oh.
I don't use it either. Like, I have them.
Not
and, like,
even
it's really
for
great for like
promoting your
someone
film.
from. I don't promote
joined
anything,
Twitter
and I don't think it's any
yesterday.
wrong if you guys do. I don't promote anything. I don't share anything ever.
Me
I
neither.
just don't personally want to live that way. I'm born in the late 70s. I want to do this. I want to see people. It makes me feel really ill, to be honest. And and I just also just don't enjoy it. And I also feel like it ain't. I don't mean to be rude, but like it ain't my job. I have a friend. I don't know if she's here right now, but I have a number of friends who are actors in TV shows right now, and studios put pressure on them to have a presence. They're not paying them to do it. It's free publicity for them, and it's like, you go do your job, unless you want to act or direct. Like.
But I do think it's important to actually, I'm kind of saying the opposite of what I just said with my last answer, but to create an audience at the same time, you know? And my first 3-4 projects were funded by Indiegogo, by crowdfunding. And like I needed that to use the social media to get the word out, to get the support, to be able to make my movie. So I do think it has a function, and if it's used properly.
Albert, how useful is it to have a super famous director come out of the water in a wetsuit in your movie? Albert's movie has a cameo from David Cronenberg, in case you don't know.
Well, if you've read any of the press for the film, it's very important because it sort of leads everything. But yeah, I mean, obviously, he's David Cronenberg is one of the, you know, not only the most famous, but also one of the greatest filmmakers to ever do it. And so you never think about, oh, I'm going to cast David Cronenberg, or I need to get David Cronenberg. Go get me David Cronenberg. But surprisingly enough, he was the easiest person to cast in this movie. We cast him in like 6 hours. We sent him the script, and he read it right away, and then he said, "I'll do it." So, yeah. He was so gracious as well. Like he was, you know, he's the coolest person in the world as well, and he knows that. So, and he knows that everybody reveres him, but he's so gracious about it, and he's so funny and sweet and smart, and so yeah, I'm just trying to take some of that David Cronenberg glow.
Yeah. So day one, David Cronenberg's on your set. What kind of pep talk are you giving yourself? Were you intimidated? Were you certain you weren't going to be?
Day one of David Cronenberg on the set was also day one of production. Oh. So yeah, it's the deep end of the pool. Yeah. But you know what? It was actually David. You know, I sat down with him and I had a conversation with him before we started, and he was very gracious to sort of tell me that, you know, this is your movie. I'm just trying to memorize my lines. And why did you write so many lines for me? And like these monologues, like what's so yeah. So he put me at ease. He put he put everybody at ease, and he was just you know, he was a pro, as they say.
Wow. All of you, any of you, what was the most useful thing, do you think, for you in your education as filmmakers? Like a mentor or a course you took, on-set experience, you who were actors, maybe it gave you a special insight into filmmaking. Is there anything that you could say to the aspiring filmmakers in the audience here that might help them? Like, in your experience, what really helped you along the way here?
Well, my acting career for sure, but I also did the Canadian Film Centre, and I loved that program. And I find the mentors that are part of that, and that's where I found Tammy. I highly recommend applying for that program.
I was in like the 3rd year of the Film Center program. Yeah, a long time ago. Writer.
Oh, wow, cool. Yeah.
And I also love the Film Center. I was paired through the WGA with a mentor who basically took me to lunch 6 times over the process, and we just chat about where I was in the process, which was amazing. I really believe in mentorship in both directions. I think that there's no limit to what you can get from both finding someone to trust and take you through it, and then also giving back when you get to a point. But the most helpful thing he said in this process was, I was like, what do I ask people when I meet with them? Like, I'm hiring people and casting people. What do I say? And he was like, why don't you ask them how they like to work? And I was like, I know that sounds so simple, but it was like literally the first thing that I said after pleasantries in every casting session, meeting or whatever. And I learned so much from asking people that question, because everyone has a different answer. And I feel like embracing your own process, knowing your own process, and finding about other people's is my big advice, which goes back to the mentoring thing.
I think the best training I ever got as a filmmaker was actually theater school. I'm not trained as a filmmaker per se, but the theater school I went to just taught me so much about story and storytelling. You had to read great plays and just ideas of trying to play as an actor as personally and specifically as possible really translate, for me at least, very much as a writer and as a director, and how I work with actors. So I'd really personally recommend people taking an acting class. I could actually really recommend John Boylan as a teacher. I think is great here, but there's definitely a lot of different ones. But just to have a language with actors, I guess like it's almost like cheating a bit to be an actor filmmaker, because that's kind of ingrained. But the biggest thing I think is just watching films for myself. I guess that's what I meant about loving and hating, is I just learned what like stayed with me. And I saw Under the Skin, and it's maybe the only film I can think of where over and over again it just gets better and better and better. I know everything that's coming, but it's never boring. I always learn things from it. And like studying cinema can seem like you're lazy and everyone else is working, but like it's work, it's homework to just like make yourself watch things in a nice sunny day, like pull down your blinds and watch stuff.
I mean, for me, I was a film geek, so I didn't have any other hobbies growing up. I never played video games. I never played sports, and it was always movies. So, but what I truly credit sort of as kind of my sort of blanket mentor is actually just being a filmmaker in Toronto right now. There's a bunch of great filmmakers, and I think we're seeing sort of the fruits of that. But also just I think we're very, very supportive of each other, and we all kind of make different kinds of films. But we watch each other's cuts. We're trying to support each other to really have this rising tide raises all ships. And for me, I have great filmmaker friends in this city, and that have mentored me. I've mentored them, or just talked things through. And even sort of the younger generation of filmmakers coming up, I think there's a lot of exciting voices, and I think seeing each other succeed and seeing somebody like Kaz make a movie and just stick to the way he wants to do it and be successful and find an audience really emboldens me as a filmmaker to take risks as well, which is sort of the theme of everything I've been saying. And so more than just one person or going to film school or whatever, it's just being plugged into the people that you work with and the people that you want to work with in the community that's making movies right now here.
Sammy, I'm going to steal your question because I think it's such a good one of how do you like to work? Because I think people have this mystique about what you have to be a director, or the shouty director, or the bossy director, whatever. I would love to hear from each of you just how you like to do it, and we can start at the end and just.
Well, I have the privilege of working with some people I've already worked with, so we're all quite close. We kind of know each other now. So Bobby Shore is one of my best friends, and I just have the advantage of being able to like shot list early and just geek out about it. So I really like to start talking to him pretty early once he's read it, and we take our time, and we definitely go through shot listing twice. Like we'll do it, and then we'll challenge it all. And it's very collaborative, and we just kind of geek out on each other's ideas and just challenge each other, and then definitely bring in Zosha and John and just talk about the world we're creating and have a very clear idea. So for me, when I'm on set, I as much as possible never say to an actor, that's your mark, and live now to our ideas. We get, like as an actor, do you ever say like you do your homework so you can throw it away? Do you ever hear that expression? Like I guess it's the same for me as filmmaking. We just try to prep as best as we can so we can be as free as we can on the day. And kind of like Sammy was saying, like you're looking at something, that's what you prepare, but for some reason it ain't working. And then you trust an instinct, or an actor does something and it changes how you're shooting it, but you know it's correct because it feels right and you were prepared, so it's not like you're flying by the seat of your pants. And I just always like to let, I guess again, because I'm an actor, I like to let them do a pass. I don't like to tell them, this is what we're doing. And then obviously if it's very formal, if it's a oneer or something, then obviously there are things you have to deal with. But I just find that the love of the game and the spirit of collaboration pushes everything to the place where you're like, this is right.
Amy Jo?
Oh my, well, a lot of what he said No. I don't know, to get like really specific, I don't know if I could go there right this very second, but I kind of like a workaholic, so it's like a constant thing. I'm constantly working. And prepping and doing my homework and starting early, and I know that as an actress, I was always a lazy actress. But as a filmmaker, I'm not lazy at all, and I think it's because of the passion I have for it. So, I mean, to go into my whole process and how I do it, I think it's too much right now, and I don't want to hear myself talk. But I just work really hard. Yeah, and do so much. I like what you said. Like, just do so much prep that then you can just throw it away and just be in the moment with the crew and the people and rely on the people around you and really utilize them.
Albert, you don't have to have an answer, but if you have one.
I mean, I totally agree with what both of you guys said. And then also for me, it's just, I think, there's a lot of super talented people in this industry in every department, in every facet. And really it's about emboldening them to let them remember that they are super creative and super awesome, and giving them sort of the platform to do that and show them and not kind of stifle them. And so, yeah, I've really just tried to create an environment where everyone's just trying to bring their A game and wants to bring their A game because they're inspired by the material, they're inspired by who they're working with, they're inspired by me, hopefully. And yeah, and then just be really prepared, but then, be prepared to throw it all out.
That's such good advice. I mean, what I would add is that I, as a writer as well, actually, in every capacity that I work, I want to always be able to tell the story and tell what it means to people. And I literally will I'll be sidling up to the grips going, this is a movie about change and how people change. And I'm going in getting a snack and saying so what do you think the movie's about? Because in this scene, so I am always telling this story and telling it to anyone who will listen and random people. And I did it all through post. And actually, we were having an interesting conversation yesterday morning with a bunch of filmmakers about how much our movies changed even in the last 24 hours before we locked them. I was still I screened my movie 5 times in the last 8 days of editing because I had a free screening room. They were like, you can use it after 9 when no one's around. And I was like, woohoo. And I just kept showing it to people and saying, I meant to say this. What did that mean to you? What did you think? This is a story. This is a story. I walk around and say it into my phone all the time. I just did that on a script I wrote. I couldn't finish it until I had been able to tell it to my phone a bunch of times and then listen to it. But that's, you have the story, you know the story. If you're here, you're probably here because you're driven to tell a story. Just tell it. Tell it to everyone. It's my
That's
advice.
excellent advice. Okay, I could talk to y'all all day, but we're running out of time. So just very quickly, you have an unlimited budget. What do you want to put out in the world? Is there one thing that some dream idea, some thing that, if money was no object, do you have a sense of what you'd want to make?
I mean, in terms of your TV film question, there's a model I love, which is that 4 to 8 part miniseries. Have you guys ever seen Southcliffe? Has anyone ever seen Southcliffe? I think it's still on Netflix. I mean, it's heavy material, but for my taste, it's just beautifully done in every way. It's like a fully British production, but then Sean Durkin, the American guy who did Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, he directed it. And I just love that 4 to 8 part shape. And it's just making a really long movie. And I'm kind of a workaholic, and I'm kind of fucking nuts. So last year when I was prepping my film, I was asked by my manager to write a sci-fi short, and it just kept on coming out, and it turned into the first draft of a novel. I'm not a novelist in any way at all. I just have this one thing that kind of came up as a weird creative vomit, and I would like to do that.
Anybody else have a dream project?
My dream project actually it's not that big, but for whatever reason, it just seems like such an impossible thing right now, which is I have this Korean farm romance thing. I pitch it to people, and people look at me blankly, but trust me, this film's gonna be amazing if I just need I just need like $3 million to do it.
All right. Anybody out there talk to Albert?
So if anybody
after.
has $3 million to give me, I promise you, this will be something really special.
I have my same thing, which seems impossible because so many people have sort of said, which is another book by the same author. So the author of the book American Women that I adapted, Susan Choi, her first book is called The Foreign Student, and it's about this. It's set in the 50s, and it's this. I'm picturing this. This is like a young woman who's living in the South. Her father is the president of a college, and it's all very whatever. And this young man comes evading the Korean War, who has basically in Korea, in his attempt to get away from the draft, applied to all the American colleges that he could get. An application for and gotten into this random one in the South, and they fall in love, and it's like fucking epic story and period and like super romantic and charged, and I think it would make an amazing mini series.
That sounds awesome.
That sounds good.
You want to do it?
Last word to you.
It's fucking awesome.
So mine would be Crazier Than You, which was the movie that I wrote about my mother, which I'm working my way up to being ready for that, and I do want the budget to be pretty big for that one because it is period and it goes through a bunch of different decades, and I want to do it right. Yeah.
Well, listen, this is super cheesy, but I look forward to being back here with all of you talking about those projects when we do them. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you all. You were terrific. Thank you.